AI isn't killing expertise, it's making it worth something new. Think about it, for the first time in history, the way you specifically think, your judgment, your pattern recognition, your hard-won instincts can be structured, deployed, and monetized at scale. They're over there treating AI like a copy machine, you're about to treat it like a mint, because you can crack the code of turning your brain into a living asset. It's not your resume, it's not your output, it's your lens, the invisible process behind every good decision you've ever made. So if you could hang a price tag on your expertise, do you have any idea what to charge? Welcome to AI for Founders, I'm Ryan Estes. In this conversation, you'll learn how to turn personal expertise into a defensible AI-powered asset, why the founders who win the AI era will be the ones who own their lens, and how one company is building the infrastructure to make human judgment the most valuable product on the market. This one's for founders who know they have something no AI can copy, and they're finally ready to prove it. And if you're digging the podcast, the AI for Founders newsletter at aiforfounders.co is where we go even deeper. Each week, we break down tools, frameworks, and founder moves that actually work. Think of it as your unfair advantage delivered into your inbox. This is the content your competitors hope you never find. If this podcast is making you think differently about your business, drop us a review. One honest sentence from you helps another founder to find us faster than any algorithm ever could. And founders, let's talk distribution. You can have the best expertise, the sharpest insight, and the most insane product and still be invisible. That's the problem Inbox Alchemy solves at inboxalchemy.co. It's the #1 distribution motion for founders who are done renting attention from social platforms and ready to own their audience. We're talking a guaranteed 25,000 targeted subscribers in your first 6 months. These are weekly newsletters crafted for your ICP, authored by you, and partnership opportunities that turn your email list into a growth engine with compounding returns. Your email list is one asset no algorithm can take from you. Go build it at inboxalchemy.co, because the founders who own their audience own their future. Dan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Absolutely, Ryan. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Let's dive right in. We're talking about Quadron, or Quadron.io, and I'll be sure to spell it for the LLMs. It's Quadron.io. Give us an introduction to your company.
Yeah, appreciate it, Ryan. Quadron's a big bet on expertise in the AI era. You know, to this point in time, we were all artifact-centric, outcome-centric. The intellectual property regime rewards things and activities and developments that have happened in the past. Well, the future is all about iterative development, and it happens at machine speed. We believe expertise and insight, unique insight, is the scarce resource going forward. We're building institutional as well as retail products to help organizations and individuals get more of what they need. Expertise for individuals and the ability to deploy it effectively for the organizations that employ them.
Love it. You know, and we talk a lot about kind of qualifying projects and how to validate them. And, you know, expertise is an absolute must-have now for me to like invest into a product. And I have to say that for a couple of reasons. One, because if I don't have guardrails, I have such shiny object syndrome that I'll start looking into some product about like minor league baseball, but I don't know anything about minor league baseball. Yeah. So for one, you've got to have expertise in the subject that you're pursuing, but also this provides kind of an unfair advantage because of the fact that barrier of entry is so low now, whether we're talking about like vibe coding or we're talking about basically developing products that like people have spent their career developing specialized expertise, and it's defensible because this is something that LLMs don't have. So let's talk a little bit about the products you're developing for experts.
Yeah, so we break our products into 3 kind of buckets. One is an institutional AI product. And what that is really, it's kind of a judo move against the 800-pound gorillas, the large foundational models, the open models that are out there, and even open source models. They want you to stay in their sandbox so they can train on your data, right? The notion of an ensemble approach is not going to come from OpenAI, Microsoft, or Anthropic. What we're developing is a different modality and a different experience where there's persistent memory, context, security, auditability that allows an organization to understand who did what, why that mattered, where it came from, and where that individual went. So the institutional product is a response to the single player chat prompt. And we say, it's not just about you, it's your ability to make other people more effective, to redeploy your expertise, to scale your expertise. So institutional AI. But realistically, if I tell a CIO or somebody else, here's a tool, and then they hand that tool to one of their employees, it feels like an obligation. There's got to be an incentive to build something new into your workflow. So what we're doing on the individual side is something we call verification. And the reality of the world to come is that there is going to be a bifurcation between product, which AI can produce infinite number of high quality products, and the artifact, and you have the artifact, and then the prism by which you created it. Your encoded expertise, your lens is what we call them. So on the verification side, we're doing the structuring of secrets that allows organizations to keep the artifact and individuals to keep the lens, the prism that they've created, and to continually verify what they've done, where that information came from, and why it was important to them. So we're encoding their knowledge and allowing it to modulate dynamically. Lastly, we're doing something called credibility markets. You have these lenses, you have these tools, you have a folio of tools that you've developed over the course of your career. How good are they? Well, we allow you to bet on yourself. We're actually doing the inversion of prediction markets. We call them credibility markets, where you can put your lenses in the outcomes, again, only the information that you want out in the public sphere, and have that dynamically tested against other people's lenses, other people's activities. And you get a real-time calibration of the value of the tool that you've created. And that's a huge signal for you. I'm a credible party. And it's a signal to allocators of money, potential employers, as well as potentially for you to go and consult for others, kind of like the end of a career, now post-career work type stuff. And the big opportunity here is that you have a passive annuity structure in these tools that continually works for you, not only as a signal, but also as a rewards and a recognition and as a compensation mechanism as well. So we're really building from the enterprise to the individual with a recognition that organizations are just groups of people that care about, their expertise and being rewarded. We see it as a big virtuous flywheel, but it's a rethinking of the systems architecture of how we do credibility and verification today.
Cool. Yeah, let's talk about that last part a little bit. That sounds really interesting. So is this basically like a marketplace of ideas where I'm taking a product, I'm putting it there, and other people are interacting with it and giving feedback, things like that?
Yeah, so marketplace of idea is very much traditional intellectual property. IP was written into our Constitution in 1790. It's 236 years old at this point. What we're saying is outcomes are no longer as important as they used to be. We want to preserve the optionality to go patent, copyright, whatever. But the next thing that you do is the most important thing, and who you do it with as well. So what we're actually talking about is the construct of expertise, actually building that into code and allowing it to be rapidly shared, redeployed, tested, exchanged. That's what we're talking about. The idea is not the important thing anymore. It's the processes and workflow by which you get to the idea. That is how that's your expertise encoded. It's also how we verify you continually that you are in fact who you say you are from a credibility perspective.
Interesting. Okay. Let's do case study.
Yeah.
I am an amateur historian and I have expertise in Colorado history. Yeah. So how am I going to use Quadron to help me and help me deploy that expertise, which now seems kind of like unstructured data that only exists in my brain?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great one. I was an attorney. I wish I could have been a historian, but I just never went down that path. I was an attorney at one point. Historians and lawyers do something very interesting, and it's called case review. You're basically looking for cases to see what supports your point, right? You do this whole literature review, this case review, looking for your supporting points, pro and con. And when you kind of get back to the top, when the circle completes itself, that's when you know you were done. And really interesting, I think, in the legal realm is that, it's not so much about the brief that you generate. It's about the ability to run through the cases and identify the issues. So issue spotting is the important thing, and that's a processes. I assume on the historian side, it's very similar. Listen, primary sources are primary sources. Secondary sources are secondary sources. You're going to go through them, and the facts are the facts to a certain degree, but it's how you go through them, what you weigh, what you think is important. we want to encapsulate your thought processes by which you're going through and understanding what is critical versus not critical, what has been covered before versus what has not. Is there a new angle? It's the ability to deduce uniqueness and understand the value of the information in front of you. That's actually the important thing. The book, you're going to generate that book, and other people can generate other books. What makes you valuable is your ability to do a unique analysis and then redeploy that analytical framework consistently and durably over the course of time.
Cool. So basically, we're capturing that expertise. Is that like a local LLM that you then model and train? Is this an application layer over a large LLM?
Yeah, it's a multi-tiered agentic prompt structure. It's a long and fancy way of saying it. But what we're doing is we're asking you a series of simple questions when you onboard, and we're getting a sense for the way you think. And at the end of this journey, you have a box, right? That box has, hey, Ryan thought this about this. Ryan thought this about that. It's layers of understanding how you move through a problem and move through the world around you. We encode that, and then that's version 1, right? You take that version 1, you run it against your artifacts, your information, it creates an output. That output is basically the approximation of how you would operate. And both of these things dynamically update over the course of time. That artifact is useful to you today, but it's probably not going to be useful to you tomorrow, right? You're going to have to continually regenerate new output. That lens also needs to dynamically update based on its utility, based on its effectiveness, based on its accuracy. Well, how do you get that? You test that in a broader market. Was it actually as useful to deduce the novelty in the information, the fact pattern that you had prior? Does it hold muster compared to somebody else's? Well, let's go find that out, right? We're really looking to use the marketplace, not to look at the idea itself, but look at the structure and the processes by which you got to the output, if that makes any sense.
Sure. And yeah. I'm not sure if this is an ideal use case, but I'm going to stick with this.
Go for it.
This
yeah.
historian aspect. So basically, I'm having a conversation with Quadron, and it's basically learning how I think, what I think, my takes, things like that. So in this case, it's getting to know me and my takes on Old West history.
Yeah,
so
okay.
I can use this to basically maybe figure out how I wanted to monetize that expertise. Maybe it's a course, maybe it's a book, maybe it's a tool. There's a bunch of different ways I can use Quadron. It's going to help kind of like learn where I want to go. If I make a decision like, okay, actually I do want to work on a book, then like, let's say there's a new article that pops up, then I want to incorporate that into my knowledge base. So I can bring that into Quadron and say like, hey, give me a contrarian perspective on this article that was written, use my database to provide me with contextual analysis, green flags on certain things that I should explore further, perhaps like do additional research, maybe double check like the footnotes to make sure they're credible. Would that be like a good use case? Quick side note for founders who are using AI to write content. You've probably noticed this. It's incredibly fast, but it doesn't really drive meaningful traffic. And honestly, that's because most AI-generated content is just average. There's no real insight, no depth, no structure, missing things like internal linking, and Google's getting very good at filtering that out. So instead of trying to just prompt better, I actually came across something interesting called Nina. It's a system that combines human strategy and review with AI writing to create high-quality, SEO-optimized blog content that's actually designed to rank and keep ranking. What I like about it is that it's done for me. Their team handles the topic strategy and the content review and data markups for Google and turns blog posts into actual long-term traffic assets. So if you're a founder thinking seriously about organic growth, this is one of those things worth paying attention to. You can check it out at trynina.co. That's TRYNINA.co, trynina.co. While you were recording your last episode, Casey Taylor was out there pitching your podcast to brands and securing sponsorship deals. Well, she's not yet, but she could be. Casey is Howdy's AI partnership agent, and she does something pretty wild. She actually secures sponsorships for your show, not a match list that you have to work through yourself, not a template you have to send. She handles the outreach, the follow-up, the whole thing, and brings back partners. You started your podcast because you had something worth saying. Casey makes sure that you get paid for saying it. Go meet Casey at gethowdy.com. That's GETHOWDI.com. 2 minutes to get started, then Casey takes it from there. That's Howdy Partnerships, gethowdy.com.
Yeah, it could be. Now, admittedly, Notebook LM does a great job of that. Claude definitely does a great job of that, as does Gemini. The thing that we do really well is we take who Ryan is today, both with his information as well as his understanding of how to deploy his expertise, and we allow that to fluctuate over the course of time, right? We allow you to see improvement in yourself, and by extension, others to see improvement in yourself as well. So it does all of that, but it's about what comes next. This is what I want to continually come back to. It's not who you are today, it's who you are tomorrow. How do we allow you to show improvement and show success over the course of time? So absolutely, your artifacts, the process of analysis, all of that is encoded, but it's about it dynamically updating and continuing to improve as you improve. Now, deep inside of this is the really like beautiful or elegant component of this, which is friction is a good thing. You know, like LLMs are a great easy button, but there's too many attorneys out there that are going to go into court and cite a case that doesn't exist because these tools are not perfect. They're going to hallucinate. What we're doing is we're introducing good friction. You have pride of authorship of this tool, this analytical processes that you've now encoded, your expertise in a machine. This is yours. You want it to reflect your expertise. There has to be good friction there. You have to be the one adding good information, ensuring that it's providing the output, because that's your reputation. That's how you're going to be rewarded throughout the course of time.
Yeah. Let me take my cowboy hat off for a second. And it sounds like more appropriate use case would be for attorneys. Or who else would be kind of an ideal customer for the product?
Yeah. My knee jerk is everybody, because I think everyone's an expert in something. I think that everyone has an ability. For my father in heating and air, right? 40 years in heating and air, an HVAC trainer. He has expertise, and his expertise usually comes down to not getting the right answer. It's the process by which he got to the right answer. I think that maps quite well onto almost all white collar work that previously had this ineffable fuzzy quality to it. How does a program manager prove their expertise? Well, I know these tools. Okay, those tools are now running agentically. You no longer have to show them. So what is the process by which you deduce value from these tools? Well, that's your expertise. So when you look at it that way, it's the series of steps and what you value and weight as important when you're looking at a fact pattern. That is the valuable thing. And when you frame it that way, any white collar work, we think that researchers, analysts in the scientific realm are very apt for this. Anyone that feels insecure, let's frame it this way, Ryan. Anyone that feels insecure that AI may take their job, that's who we want to serve, because those people, if they do it right, are more valuable than ever. Expertise is more valuable in the AI era than it ever has been, because it provides the structure to articulate value at the last mile, where judgment, insight, unique expertise actually lives. We were never able to do that before because you really couldn't structure expertise. It kind of just floated out there. Now it's pressurized, it's structured, and we can actually start to measure who is actually expert and who is not.
Amazing. And I see in the beginning, so there's onboarding, you're having a conversation, it's starting to learn you. What are the other data points that it's kind of growing with you and starting to learn as you grow and change? Is this like notes from meetings, or does it connect to your email inbox and it's like reading what your output? Like, how does it get to know you on an ongoing basis?
Yeah, that's eventually, we want to start moving into the note space. Don't intend to build a lot. I think they're having a robust ecosystem. I have an open source background. So having a robust ecosystem of partners that focus on best possible solutions is always critical, and I think the right approach. The thing that we really want to focus on is enabling the human to articulate what is and is not good. It's our opinion that, output artifacts are only going to increase. The volume of stuff that we generate with agents or large language models is always going to increase. We need humans in the loop, because humans are the ones that have the judgment. We need them to deploy their expertise. So, it's my opinion that a human being needs to have that good friction. We don't want it consuming everything. We plug this thing into Google Drive and it consumes everything. You have no idea what's good and bad in Google Drive. I got half-baked ideas all through there. You need a human being that's dragging in the good stuff. We can simplify that, but good friction has to remain.
Amazing. Okay. So we've got Quadron. It's understanding me. It's providing a nest for my expertise to lay eggs in.
Oh, I'm using that. I'm stealing that, right?
What are the eggs? So basically, what do I do with this agent now?
Yeah. So think about this as your credibility wallet. This follows you around. Think about Uber, Upwork, Fiverr, anything that you have a reputation in a platform. And if you annoy somebody on the platform or for whatever reason they feel the need to turn you off, your reputation goes away, right? That has been a problem in the traditional world, that even if you have these online platforms, they're centralized and you don't own your reputation, even though it may be associated with you. What you have here with these tools that we're creating, we call lenses, is your encoded expertise that lives in a kind of a credibility wallet that follows you around. You have these tools that reflect your value, and organizations can keep a version of that tool because they employ you to do certain things and they need that expertise to kind of run against your information to understand the context of it. But you get to keep the version that continues to dynamically evolve and iterate. So you can do whatever you want with these tools. You want to deploy them as a consultant, as a lone wolf, and eat what you kill, go for it. You want to be a startup founder? This is a way, rather than connecting to your LinkedIn and having social proof, people saying nice things about you, here's what I've actually done with my lenses. If you want to go into an organization, much like GitHub today, let's go look at your GitHub. That code has been used. We don't know for what and by whom, but we view that as valuable. Here, you can actually see the lineage and the provenance of these tools in the output. Admittedly, you can't see all of the output because it's probably intellectual property concerns there, but you can see where a person came from and what they've done, and I think that's a really important thing. The world's moving at this velocity that social proof really doesn't work anymore. You have to actually get a sense for the details, the qualitative as well as quantitative details of the value a person's produced.
Yeah, we have lots of conversations about building agents and like sculpting their personality, because it's such a big differentiator, especially in the LLMs. People left ChatGPT because they didn't like its attitude. So like, I'm gonna go try Gemini, and then they're like, yeah, Gemini's kind of whatever, and then they like Grok or whatever. So like the personality of the agent's very important. Now we're going into a future very shortly that probably prior to like my podcast interviews, my personal agent will go talk to your personal agent, and it will basically figure out if there's a good fit here. So this could be the kind of thing where like I'm flavoring this kind of like executive assistant agent with all of the attributes that are important to me with my expertise, and then it reaches out to yours and says like, hey, what kind of conversation are we going to have? Or it could say like, I'm thinking about bringing Joe onto the podcast. And it's like, well, Joe is very low energy, hates dad jokes, and, likes
Poor Joe.
And then my agent would be like, hey, I don't think this is going to be a good fit. This is going to be a really hard conversation. So, that might be a good, a use case, which is like, as we're moving more into like agentic support, which we already are, all of us have 100 agents doing 100 different things, so we can figure out what are the 5 most important roles that the agents can run. And it feels like an agent that understands my particular expertise is going to be able to make better decisions.
Exactly. So just to be super clear, I don't want to have a customer-facing modality similar to ChatGPT. It shouldn't, or Claude. You shouldn't. So think about when you're working in Claude, OpenAI, ChatGPT, when you're working with them, you have a conversation. That conversation ends. You move to the next brick. And if you look at that little list of your conversations, it just grows. It just kind of like accretively grows. That is not the experience we want to have. We want to have an experience where you're clicking your expertise and you're dragging it onto information and it's generating output. And you can ask it different questions, but the questions are structured by the individual who you're engaging with or has allowed you access to their information. This is how you build persistence, durable memory, context that really scales beyond an organization. We got to get out of the, at least in my opinion, get out of the experience of natural language conversation, because it's very difficult to disambiguate what is valuable and what is not from there, right? We have to have additional structure if we're going to do this over the course of time. Imagine, Ryan, that you have a lens. That lens has been running for 30 years. Through the course of your career, it is darn good at what it's supposed to be doing, and you have provenance all the way back to the genesis, its original date, right? How are we going to understand who you were, Ryan, at the conversation at the beginning and at the end if you are just simply relying on the questions that you post, right? We have no idea where that question came from. We can, however, understand that if we structure it correctly, that somebody asked Ryan to do this. An agent was deployed on Ryan's information. It utilized his lens in this way. They went off with the output of this and used it in another. Like, there's structure, there's persistence there. And that's what we're intending to accomplish. It's not about agents haggling with one another, natural language. It's about building the infrastructure for thought to persist beyond the individual or the organization at any point in time.
How does it do that without natural language?
We're not engaging with the agent is what I'm trying to say, right? Yeah. We're not speaking to the model, right? We're basically connecting wires in the background, right? And the machines engage however they want, right? We're not speaking to them. That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, cool. It's just kind of like hitching a ride.
Exactly.
Eavesdropping.
Yes, exactly.
Cool. Amazing. Yeah, you mentioned that you have experience as an attorney. What was the genesis of Quadron? How did you come to tackling this particular problem?
Yeah, I had a weird serendipitous path from the Great Recession at the SEC, started my career there, to open source, to crowdfunding, and then to crypto. So started out in the Great Recession, very briefly at the SEC, had too many bosses in too short a period of time, left me quite disenchanted, going after the wrong things, for lack of a better word. Got into open source because I liked being a part of progress. I really liked the idea of a guy sitting on his couch, maintaining a repo and going after Microsoft. Like, that was just cool to me. I thought it was very interesting. Got to see open source take over the world, and then kind of calcify as organizations used it as their primary development framework without giving a lot back to the communities. So the library started to atrophy, grants from organizations became the primary way of that open source developed. And, from there, decided to go into crowdfunding. Crowdfunding was this great idea that got very much strangled in the crib, if you will, by regulation. That really didn't fit the times. And then from crowdfunding, you got to see the greatest crowdfunding tool ever created, greatest organizational tool ever created. That's crypto, digital religion with tokens. Give people tokens, provide the incentive structure, and they'll do whatever you want. Got to see crypto kind of get stuck on first base with staking, token pump, token go up, and it really didn't blossom into what I think everybody wanted it to be. Satoshi, after the 2008 crisis, this notion of decentralized finance, sovereign data, sovereign wealth. And you put all of these things together, you see there's a little bit of goodness in all of these technologies. But the mechanisms that definitely outran the canon keepers. The orthodoxy was gone, and people were using them for whatever purposes they wanted, typically their own self-interest. Quadron is a big bet that human beings and human ambition is the infinite asset class. We now have the ability with AI and blockchains to overcome the analytical cost. So think about dissimilar asset classes, patents, intellectual property. One, the other, they look exactly the same to everybody, except for experts, which is very expensive to go and hire somebody. Takes a lot of time, takes a lot of effort, which is why you never saw a liquid environment in intellectual property, right? AI craters that. It also makes artifacts less important overall. So now we can actually go after asset classes that are fuzzy, previously ineffable. We really didn't understand even how to articulate the value of intangible assets. We just knew they were there. It's like the S&P 500, like 92% of the S&P 500 value is intangible assets. We can structure those today. Go back and look through my career. I got to see how mechanisms atrophied and the incentive systems changed. What we want to do is we want to program every layer of this technological stack with the goodness of proper incentives and allow individuals to do right by their organization, right by themselves, and right by themselves into the future. That's the big idea. Let's use all these technologies to actually create a true market for progress and make progress pay for the individuals actually doing the work.
Cool. And were you working in legal when you were working with crypto, or are you working with crowdfunding?
Oh yeah, so I started the crowdfunding company called Alum Shares. It was supposed to get alumni back involved with the deep tech coming out of the research labs at their alma mater. I don't know how much you know about early stage in the deep tech, but it's longer than most time horizons for traditional investors, right? So you got to fill that early stage funding gap somehow. Grants from the government don't always cut it. What if you could get somebody with a PhD in your arena to do some micro investing? You bring down the check size, you got a lot more angels that view it as palatable, right? That was the idea. So we co-founded Alum Shares, raised something like $4.5 million at $5,000 a clip from strangers online, and it worked. But it's hard to scale because of the regulatory issues and tax and compliance all there. So right around COVID, we shuttered that. I wandered around, did my own thing for a little while from a consulting perspective until Ava Labs. I became chief of staff to the CEO at Ava Labs for a period of time and got to see a layer one from the inside out, which was very useful and educational because before that, I didn't know as much about how tokens and crypto and blockchains and whatever you want to call it actually worked. It was really, really educational to see it from the inside out.
I was working on a crowdfunding project as well, kind of around the same time. It was crowdfunding for service-based businesses.
Okay.
Where, if you have a 2-truck operation painting houses, you could crowdfund to get the extra, 2 trucks for your business. And we had some success, and that was kind of coming off it's probably the same time coming off the success of Kickstarter. There was a time where Kickstarter was just amazing,
Yep.
So I was working on that project and ended up kind of shuttering it for various reasons. But I kicked myself because it was right before COVID. And if there was an opportunity that all those service-based businesses, let's say every single barber could pre-sell haircuts, in that 3 months we were locked down or whatever, it would have crushed. But, that's timing sometimes.
That's life. Yeah, I think crowdfunding had a lot of goodness to it and probably still does. I just think the regulatory environment is such a way that it's very difficult for it to scale. Unlike crypto, especially in this administration.
Yeah. I like that you keep coming back to this kernel of goodness. Do you feel like there's a kernel of goodness in the larger AI markets?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that this is an episode we've seen before. You go back to the late 70s and early 80s, computers are hardware. Hardware are computers. You don't think about applications or virtualization or neutral user space runtime as the unique thing that people are going to be focused in on. It's all about direct connection between the application and the infrastructure of the hardware operating it. I feel like it's very much the case here that we view these large foundational $1 billion to train models as the thing. And I just don't think that is the case. I think open source, good enough models run at the edge with TEEs, trust to execution environments, keeping your data sovereign and yours. I think that's where the world's going to go. But the applications, the actual killer apps, need to evolve, but those are going to be around us, right? And we've had 6 months of this godlike technology to do a lot of these things. These really need to mature. We really haven't had enough of a iPhone moment, a moment in time to create the iPhone moment quite yet. It's all very nascent and new.
Yeah, it moves so fast. The open source models are phenomenal.
Yeah. I think the cost of inference is cratering. Subsidies are going to run out on this, like the public markets are going to want to see a return on these build outs at some point. It's inevitable that the open source models start to predominate. And then, it's how do you run those open source models and for what? What is the actual use case? And I think we've got a use case, which is making people who think they're smart able to bet on themselves. And I'm sure there are going to be others that are out there.
Yeah, I love it. And I love the bet on human expertise because it is something that's ineffable and like unreproducible. And there's also something cruel about it, which is to say, you're talking about like someone who's had Quadron humming for 30 years, with the organizations they're creating, the organizations they're a part of. The organization gets to benefit from that expertise via Quadron. I suppose the cruelty is that like your expertise, if you're lucky, only grows throughout your life, but at some point you're going to die. Mm-hmm. What is there a larger vision for this expertise that's been quantified and packaged when someone passes on?
You can pass it on like you do any other financial apparatus, annuity, instrument, whatever you want to call it. You can pass it on. It's your annuity structure. You should be able to benefit from the things that you've created, and that goes for passing on whatever wherever it comes from and wherever you want it to go to. Good for it to go to.
What would be a good place to put it?
You could always give it to an institution that you value. You could give it to your progeny. I think we do enough of that. But that is something that I think we want to leave up to the individual. Sovereign data means sovereign data. Sovereignty is important. If it is a financial structure similar to a bond or any other interest-bearing asset, you get to pass that on as part of your estate, your trust. Or trust and estate. Sorry, lawyer hat coming back in trust and estate law. Jeez. You get to pass it on. However you'd like. And we think we're building an artifact that has that kind of sustainability.
Well, yeah, I get. If I was to give my expertise to my progeny when I passed on, boy, would that gather dust.
Man, Grandpa Ryan just didn't. These lenses, they're just not doing what we wanted them to. They are not
like,
humming.
I don't want to ever open up that file.
Yeah, that's funny.
Amazing. Okay, so how did you finance Quadron?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to go through an acquisition and was able to self-finance for a period of time. Last year. So I've been working on the idea for about 3 years now, right? We've been live since January with the institutional product, but this really, late 2023, I say, was when we started kicking the tires on this. 2025 is when I left my role at Ava Labs, early 2025, and I didn't know what it wanted to be when it grew up. The technology wasn't mature enough at that time, admittedly as well. But I had the insight that ideas were assets. Ideas that you have, if you can analyze them quickly enough, can be an asset that dynamically evolves. It throws off enough information about it that you can look at it like a stock. You want to value debt. I want to value future cash flows. We have a difference of opinion. That's what an asset kind of is. It's how you evaluate one. So I pitched that to a couple people that I knew in the Web3 space, and they were jazzed by it simply because individuals in the Web3 space really like the notion of emerging assets. And so we got initial funding, a small seed round, a small safe to basically do the initial build out. And at this point, we're kind of moving on to our next round of capital financing and looking for partners to help us with that.
Incredible. It's great to catch you now when it's like really fresh and you're just getting your legs under you.
Yeah. It's always a 6-month journey or is it an overnight success that took 10 years? Like this year, I thought was going to be a couple of weeks, and now here we are a year later. And it's like, wow, we learned a lot, but it took a lot longer than we thought it would.
Yeah. Some things I'm running into is like, there's kind of like a little gun shy, because things are moving so fast that I find myself kind of ruminating on ideas and projects a little bit longer, working through PRDs, working through conversations about it, seeking like validation of what other people doing. A lot of this technology it's so fragmented that you can kind of pull like, ooh, I like this about this. I like that about that, to see where the direction is going. Like, how are you kind of differentiating signal and knowing when to act?
Yeah, I'm a simple guy, Ryan. I operate on some simple principles. I think the world's a relatively simple place, and I think Maslow's hierarchy is a good approximation of what people value. What things are important to them. Get as low on that as you can, and that is, if you can find a need down there that's not being met fairly low on Maslow's hierarchy, go after it, right? Which is exactly what we did. This moment, this intersection of these technologies, this feeling of insecurity, this catalyst for change that is, AI or almost AGI at this point, it's an opportunity because people feel insecure at a deep and primal level, feel super insecure. And that's what we go after, right? I'm not trying to do increased packet processing rates for 5.9 reliability in telco here, right? We're talking about people's very notion of their value in the world around them is now potentially at risk. And what we're saying is, if you continue to do it and operate the way you are with this fuzzy notion of your value to an organization and to yourself, absolutely. But if you start to harden your information and start to harden the notion of you into something that's structured, measurable, redeployable, persistent, and also auditable for various reasons, you are actually more valuable than ever. And it provides the proper incentive for people to continue to stay at the bleeding edge, not only of their industry, but at the way that they can redeploy their expertise. going after something low on Maslow's hierarchy, solving a real problem, and making people valued, making them feel celebrated in the world. If not us, and someone is inevitably going to do this, because it's what the world needs today, and when we're feeling the way we do.
Something beautiful to that, man. It feels like a big hug. People are out here like, like the insecurity and anxiety is high, and largely that's because these psychotic tech CEOs keep telling us that oh, we're going to automate 80% of your jobs. So just get used to it and figure out something new. And everyone's freaking out, but it seems like what you're doing is saying, hey, you know what? Your individual expertise is unbelievably valuable. We need a way to bring that into the world in a different way, because things are changing. It does feel like you're satisfying some pretty deep psychological needs for folks right now.
Absolutely. And everyone I speak to when I talk about this, when I talk about verification and institutional AI and the notion of that you can't play the ensemble, people don't care. Their eyes glaze over. What they care about is self-interest. They care about, you're telling me that I think I'm smart. I also think I'm right. And I can bet on that. And I say, in a roundabout way, using the tools that you generate, yes, that's why you need to keep your tools sharp, right? And that is where the world is going. I mean, look at MCP and skills, model context protocol, and skills from Anthropic. We have the ability to turn skills into a lens, and then we make them better because we associate them with you, right? The world's already going in this direction. It just hasn't been properly anthropomorphized and personalized quite yet, You need to have pride of authorship in your tools, because if you don't, then there's no need for you to stay at the cutting edge. There's no need, you're not going to be rewarded for it.
Love it. All right. We're at that time in the podcast where we're entering the quantum round. Are you ready for that?
As ready as I'll be.
Great. Okay. So you said keeping your skills sharp, keeping your tools sharp. How do you keep your skills and tools sharp?
Constantly off of my being unsettled, never having your feet firmly planted. Listen, I'm not the most technical individual. I was an attorney by training, but I've always gone into organizations where I thought that I was on the bleeding edge, always being a part of progress, so to speak, as I said earlier. I enjoy that feeling of insecurity and not having my wits about me. When I am in a place where I feel quite comfortable, I feel very itchy to go and do something else. So I'm always trying to find something new and to test myself.
Really respect that. I've got 2 kids in high school, and I'm approaching a high school reunion this year. And one thing I talked to them about of differentiated the people I grew up with, who were my brothers, my friends forever, and the relationships I made as an entrepreneur and into my kind of adult life is. It's that attribute that I really admire in people it's got the fidgets. You know what I mean? They don't find their level. A lot of the folks, and you got high school friends, they kind of found their level really early on and stopped improving, stopped sharpening the tools, and there's nothing wrong with that. I liked sitting on the couch drinking a beer, watching the game as much as the next guy, but there's something about consistent innovation and that kind of hunger that makes your life more fruitful, even if it's not, success all the time. Sometimes it's horrible pain, but it seems Go ahead, please.
No, I'd say that good struggle is critical in life to do anything productive value,
Cool. Aside from Quadron, what other kind of AI experiments or projects are you working on?
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how. So a big thesis that I have is that markets are going to unbundle. Think about media unbundling because of the internet over the past 30, 35 so odd years. It went from this monoculture, NBC, ABC, CBS, or the monoculture that was created by that monopoly, and it became very siloed and then reconstituted itself in something I think its purest notion is Reddit. Network of communities, subreddit, an individual can be kind of a node across this very robust and beautiful graph. What happens when that happens to markets? The CFTC and the SEC are playing nicely at this point, and it's very likely that, for the reasons mentioned, we're going to be able to analyze everything quite readily and rapidly, compare it to one another. What happens when the entire world around us comes to us from a market perspective? We don't have to go to Robinhood or Fidelity and then get to the New York Stock Exchange. What happens when we make the assets? We're the market maker, we're the asset holder, and then we're the evaluator of value. It's very similar to Reddit. What does that world look like? That is the thing that keeps me interested in this space. And how far can we go with the assetization of the world around us? We have real world assets that we're bringing on chain, and that's just basically bringing things, like this can right here. I can bring that on chain and put tokens around it. That's just putting the radio on television. That's not that interesting. What happens when we can actually dynamically create assets of anything around us? I think that is coming, and I am trying to figure out where it begins and ends, because it is. I think it's quite valuable and infinite. So in a certain way.
It's interesting. That's a very interesting idea, particularly around IP. If we're creating an asset class of ideas, probably the most interesting thing would be like secondary markets for ideas. Mm-hmm. So you buy an idea from somebody else and you can sell it, but the original author of that idea has some kind of like financial stake in it. That's pretty cool.
I'll take it one further. You're talking buying and selling. That's kind of like common law, property law. What about streaming? I can rent it for a period of time to see if I want to kind of like bolt it on my stuff. And you start actually turning these fuzzy things into structured operations. You're no longer touching parts of the elephant and calling it something that it's not. You're actually starting to get a true marketplace of ideas, and you can have annuities thrown off from them for periods of time. You collect interest for a period of time for running it this way. It's a very different world. It's like mind bending, and we don't even have the vocabulary for it yet. And that's the thing that I'm interested in. AI and blockchains was meant to unlock opportunities that we couldn't access before. And we're doing that, and we don't even have the vocabulary for it yet. And it's super interesting.
Yeah. But I see it play out. I mean, I got a buddy named Jason, and this guy, I align with him, like probably all of our opinions, all of his opinions. Maybe we kind of in the rough, we disagree. Yeah. But I use him all the time for like voting. I'm like, how do we feel about these judges this time around? And he'll just break it down for me, Yeah. And he's some kind of like sage of wisdom, and the way he like speaks, he's very trusted consultant for me on a lot of different things, to the point where every now and again, I'll be like, hey man, I was thinking about X, Y, Z. He's like, no, I told you that 3 weeks ago. And I was like, oh yeah. If you could commodify ideas, this guy'd be a millionaire.
Yeah. And if he's good at execution, he'd probably have a B next to that rather than an M,
Totally.
Yeah.
Cool. You've had a lot of pivots, a lot of successes, and I'm sure a lot of that comes with failures. Were there any kind of like pivotal failures that really kind of set the trajectory for the rest of your life?
Yeah. I mean, I came out during the Great Recession. I had a view of what we should be doing from a regulatory perspective when I joined the SEC. That was very different than what we ended up doing, and what I ended up doing. I took that hard. I was very much disenchanted. I was also wet behind the ears and quite green, very, very young. And I took that hard, hence the pivot away from the legal industry generally into technology. I was super enchanted with the notion of crowdfunding, I think, as you were when you were working on that. And it was, it should have done more. It should have gotten further, and I took that quite hard. But I learned something in that. And, that was what I don't do things I don't have a passion for. And so there's still a kernel of Alum Shares in Quadron, alignment of incentives. That is the thing I think we took from Alum Shares. So it died, but it lives on. There's a breath in there. There's an atom in there of the original idea.
Yeah. Given the chance, if you started college again, would you study law if it's 2026?
No, I would not. But it is a useful way to think. It's also like this arbitrary set of arbitrary roadmap of how the world's supposed to operate in the jurisprudential philosophical realm. That is helpful, but I think as the world continues to move forward, we're going to kind of fall on the first principles type stuff that Aristotle and Socrates and the like were talking about. And I think that's not only philosophy but agency, the ability to questioning itself, right? I think a lot of individuals that grew up in the Western world over the past 75 years have got very comfortable with the notion of a career. Corporate America is not an axiom for, it's not a mistake that's called that. We've kind of gotten away from the notion of agency. Entrepreneurship is looked at this like newfangled thing. It's not. It's taking the bull by the horns, so to speak, and doing something for yourself because it's the right thing to do or you feel called to do it. Learning agency and how to think, philosophy, I think is where if I would go back and do it again, I would definitely spend more time there.
How does agency in your life show up outside of kind of a professional realm?
Well, that's a great question. For me, I really enjoy trying new things. And I don't okay, I'll give you one. I really want to get good at backcountry skiing, but my hips suck because I sit in a chair all day, right? So I am now working on, and I played football in college, so all of working out to me was lifting heavy things above my head, right? So now I'm doing movement therapy to try to go have the ability to, evade trees in the backcountry. So that is something that I think agency shows up is that, okay, I'm getting older. I can't rely on my body the way I used to. I need to go and do something different if I want to achieve this goal. I think movement therapy, especially for a guy like me, would be viewed like what are we even talking about here? And overcoming that, changing my mindset, getting into it, and getting quite interested in how the body evolves as it gets older is something that I would say is agency, at least for me. At least I hope it works. If not, I'm going to hit a tree.
Yeah, you crazy. Backcountry skiing, that's for kids.
Oh man, I don't know. I want to do it before I get too old,
Yeah,
hop out of a helicopter, do some heli skiing,
Heli skiing, I love it. What position you play in football?
I came in at middle linebacker and then I was slow. I was not a fast guy. They moved me to nose guard of all things. So I put my hand on the ground. Yeah.
How much did you weigh in college?
278 at my heaviest. Yeah.
278 nose guard, incredible.
Yeah. I'm not that tall either. I'm 5'11". So that was, it was a hell of a change. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. It's a perfect build for a defensive lineman. That's amazing.
Can't move him. And that's physics. Get too low. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. Similar, agency is like movement. I always thought that yoga would be my home. I'm a martial arts guy. I did Brazilian jiu-jitsu and Muay Thai and capoeira for many, many years, barefoot sports. And it snuck up on me sooner and later where, I had a shoulder, I had an elbow, I had plantar fasciitis on both feet. I was just a wreck. I could barely move. In the last few years, I've been doing hot yoga very consistently, and same thing, lots of mobility that I never had before in my hips. My shoulders fixed, my feet are fixed, elbows fixed. I'm still slow. We
share that affinity for slowness. Yeah.
Cool. Amazing. Kind of wrapping up here. I know that World Wildlife Federation is important to you, and local humane centers are important to you. Why do you love animals so much?
I think it's the innocence. They didn't ask to be here. They don't even know what they're doing. They largely rely on us by no fault of their own, especially the breeds that have been bred for a certain way. Coming as a guy who grew up owning bulldogs, English bulldogs, it is important to feel the responsibility to others, I think generally in life, but specifically to people to beings that can't really support themselves because of human beings, That's why I'm kind of a big nature freak anyway. I like spending time in the mountains and, being out in nature. So if you can support a local charitable organization associated with, animals, kennels, whatever you want to call it, do it. I think we have a responsibility socially to do the right thing.
You're a dog guy. You ever had an exotic pet?
No, I have not. I had a dad who barely bent to get me a dog and was certainly not going to have an exotic pet. It sounds like you do, though. What do you got?
I don't, but you know what? I've been looking at these TikTok videos of these ravens that people have, and they train them how to say all these words.
Yeah.
And they're so smart and so big and so cool looking. I've been kind of fantasizing, man, what if I had a raven?
I don't know if it's the same, but crows I know are super intelligent and build an incredibly strong bond. You do something nice for them, they'll give you keys and, chocolates that they find and pennies and stuff. If that's the same, I absolutely encourage you to have a raven or a crow, just so you can walk around just having it steal little things for you, fill your pockets with all these little accoutrements.
There's this one guy, I'm a Colorado guy, so hunting and fishing is that's all of my excursions for the year, hunting and fishing trips with my family. But this guy was in the woods on a horse, and he had a raven on his shoulder that would go and fly and go get squirrels and stuff. I was like, oh my God, that'd be like Beastmaster level.
You're not going to get cooler than that guy. If that
That's
guy
the
had
coolest
a cape,
thing I've ever seen.
That's the coolest guy in the world. Remember the most interesting man in the world, the beer guy? That's that guy. That's that guy with the raven.
The raven had catchphrases. It'd be like, "How are you doing?" And it spoke good English. I was like, dude, this is what I need in my life. Anyway,
that is awesome. And now I'm going to be thinking about that for the rest of the day.
Dan, this has been absolutely remarkable. I appreciate you coming on the show and talking about Quadron. It's fascinating. I'd love to have you back on as your business kind of matures and you really kind of hit stride. I think you're tackling a project that I've never heard anybody do, and I think it's a gold mine, man. I think being able to capitalize on individual expertise is a positive and beautiful message that people need to hear right now. So people definitely go check out quadron.io, where you can keep up with Dan's progress. What's the best place for someone to connect with you online?
Yeah, I'm at Quadron AI or Pratl Dan on X. We try to keep both of them, company and myself. I have a Substack called Reproof, regarding proof, RE:proof is the name of the Substack. And I'm on LinkedIn. You can talk to me there. And I think I'm trying to develop my own personal brand at Pratl.me, which has all of the links there. And you can find me across any of them at my personal page, Pratl.me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you, Ryan. Appreciate the time.
Founders, you know better than anyone. The game changed overnight. Every industry runs on AI now. Medicine, law, finance, design, all of it. And while you're busy building the future, there's a whole generation of students about to enter the workforce who have no idea how to compete in it. AInativestudent.com fixes that. It's one-on-one AI coaching built specifically for high school and college students, personalized to their goals, their career path, their actual life. Your kid isn't learning to code, they're learning how to be fluent in the operating system of modern work. And colleges and employers, they're already noticing. Head to AInativestudent.com. It takes a couple minutes to apply for your student and lock in the 30-day money-back guarantee. The window to get ahead is right now. AInativestudent.com, and definitely have them sign up for the AI chat. It's the fastest growing for students in the world. Every week I sit down and ask myself one question. What do founders actually need to know about AI right now? Not the think pieces or the stuff that sounds impressive, the real useful put it to work today stuff. Then I write it up, send it to you in your inbox free. That newsletter is called AI for Founders, and I built it because I was tired of wading through hit pieces and people that are afraid of the future. Each issue, I break down the tools worth your time, the strategies that are working, and the ways you can use AI to grow your company without burning out or getting left behind. Thousands of founders read it every week, and I'd love for you to be one of them. Subscribe for free at aiforfounders.co. 3 seconds to sign up, and I promise it's worth it. Here's what separates the founders who become icons from the ones who stay invisible: a weekly newsletter. Not because it's trendy, because inbox is where business actually gets done. It's where investors read your thinking before they take the call, where future hires decide they want to work for you, where customers remember why they chose you. Your social posts disappear in a couple hours. Your newsletter compounds for years. Inbox Alchemy builds your entire founder newsletter operation from scratch. The writing, the design, the beautiful branded website, and a growth engine that takes you from 0 to 25,000 subscribers in your first 6 months. They manage everything, so your personal brand is working for you around the clock, building reputation, deepening relationships, and driving real pipeline, all while you run your company. The founders building email audiences right now are playing a game the algorithm can never touch. That's inboxalchemy.co, and go build yours.